All right. Well, hey, everyone. It's just at the top of the hour now, and we only have 30 minutes, so I'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Artificial Discussion, a new third monthly 30-minute discussion meant to demystify the digital lab, brought to you by Artificial, obviously. I'm Ginger Cooper, Chief Commercial Officer here at Artificial, and your host for these monthly discussions. Today, I'm joined by Mike Burke, Director of Research and Automation Technology at Amgen, and Olga Seltzer, VP of Automation at Harbinger Health. And today, our topic is shifting to a digital lab mindset. So before we dive into our topic, I'm going to turn it over to Mike and Olga to go ahead and introduce themselves. So Mike.
Great. Hi, everybody. My name is Mike Burke. I've been at Amgen about 20, this is actually my 20th year. So I'm excited to talk about this subject because I feel like I've now been here long enough to sort of see these different evolutions that we've gone through, over the years. And I think we're very much in the throes of one right now. The whole time I've been at Amgen has been in the Research and Automation Technologies or RAT group. And our role at Amgen is to sort of be this small engineering team to find opportunities throughout research and occasionally beyond research to speed up or improve the processes happening in that lab, however you may define that. And we keep a pretty broad perspective or broad definition of what that means. And it's changed over the years from, very much just putting hardware in place to informatic ecosystems, is more commonly what we're doing now. So I think the topic is very relevant and I'm excited for this conversation. Thanks for having me, Ginger.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. Olga?
Hi, everyone. And I apologize a little bit for my voice, but at least it's back. Olga Seltzer, I am VP of Automation at Harbinger Health. I actually split my time with two flagship companies, another one being Laurent. So two very different companies from the flagship ecosystem. Harbinger Health is a early cancer detection company, and automation is one of the key pillars for the organization to really automate the process from beginning to end to ensure, we minimize any potential human mistakes throughout the process. And Laurent is circular RNA company, kind of working building up on what Moderna has done over the years. But it's more, as far as automation is concerned, it's more your traditional R&D environment. I've been doing this for over 20 years, kind of stumbled into this space when I graduated college and never looked back. It's been a great experience. Definitely the field has evolved tremendously as far as the number of players that's out on the market, and the prevalence of automation in every lab. And I think it means different things to different people as far as the lab automation goes, or digital lab in general. So I'm excited to participate in this conversation and share our experiences and our foresight.
Awesome. Thanks so much, you guys. Folks, the Q&A is open. So along the way, if you have Q&A or questions that you want, we can try and get them answered during this chat. If not, we'll probably answer them offline and then post them to our website in a blog format or something. So again, the topic today really is around shifting from this lab automation mindset, which can be somewhat siloed and definition dependent, into how are we migrating into this digital lab mindset? Like, what does it mean? What is the definition? And, how are, Mike and Olga or Amgen and Harbinger or Harbinger Health and Laurent even approaching this? And so, I don't know, let's, maybe Mike, if you want to start, right? Like,
sure.
What is even a digital lab mean, in Amgen ecosystem? Because I know it's different for everyone. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think for us, my interpretation of it is that we're in an era now where data science, big data is kind of the rule of the day. And that's requiring us to generate data sets in increasingly large volumes and process and consume that data in a way that it doesn't scale if you're still doing any of it by hand. So I think the days of, hey, you walk up into an instrument, put put some plates in it, read some plates, get data in an Excel spreadsheet and do your analysis are gone, right? Like things have to be touch free now. So that means both the automation, right? So there still is a hardware component to it. But I think the industry has evolved, and I'm pretty sure we wouldn't buy, but I don't think it would really be an issue. An instrument that doesn't have an API that allows us to integrate it to a bigger system, that is fairly solves the problem. So our challenge has now become more like, well, we need to get the data off these instruments in whatever format they're in, transform it and get it into a place where data scientists can go to town on it. So our focus now is more on, I believe, and in my experience in the last couple of years, has been more focused on fully automating the informatic ecosystem so that it's touch-free and can scale beyond, what you can do by hand.
That's great. Olga, is the definition or how you approach like a digital lab slightly different at your companies, or?
I think there's definitely similarities, but the way I think about it is, in general, the interconnectivity of everything and everybody, and that includes the scientists, right? They're part of the equation. They're the ones that are making the instruments hum, right? So connecting on a human layer and hardware and the software and the data lakes, right? And understanding that all of those pieces need to be able to coexist. And just in general, kind of looking at a broader picture and at a higher level, how do you build a lab where, what are some of the things that you need to think about where different people can touch the same set of data that's being generated on laboratory automation, but parse something or extract a different type of information, right? Whether it's a chemist, whether it's biologists, computational guys, informatics, right? The same automated run can kind of feed all of those different needs across the organization. And I think it's just understanding that from the get-go is a lot easier, and then trying to build that out once the organization is, has a little bit more of an infrastructure and is set in its own ways.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's very hard once you already have a way of doing something in a silo, and now you're being asked or told that no, you have to play well with everybody. And it's much easier to start that way if you're a startup. It's a little more challenging when you're a bigger company. All right, so Ginger, I warned you I was going to tell this anecdote, and I think this is the perfect time, because what Olga said is exactly the experience my wife had at her job. She was a nurse, and she was working in the newborn nursery at a time where they transitioned from charting on basically clipboard and pencil and paper to like their equivalent of digital lab notebooks. And she called me one day, very bent out of shape, and she had some choice words to tell me how much she hated software developers, because now it used to be where when a baby would pee-pee, she would write down on a piece of paper baby peed and write a timestamp. And she called me and said, it just took me 13 mouse clicks and 8 menus to find the checkbox where so this whole transformation wasn't helping her in her daily tasks, and she didn't get to see the benefit of having go through this digital transformation. I think we're kind of starting to experience that in our world as well, right? Because like I said, it used to be that scientists would generate data in the lab, and they were the consumers of that data, and it would inform their next activity in the lab. That still is a little bit the case, but not quite as much. Now we have, entire organizations of data scientists, and they're the ones that are, making use of that data and informing the scientists what to do next. So I think it is important for everybody to understand how they're contributing to the bigger picture and see the value in it. I do think ultimately our scientists get that feedback more than my poor nurse wife did at the time.
It's such a fitting, anecdote though, and speaks to a lot of the challenges that I know a lot of you guys have in the labs, right? Just from the disparate ways that, going from paper or Excel files and right? And like you said, trying to streamline it because there's multiple people touching different parts of your workflows now, where that might not have been the case when we all started 20 years ago, right? I guess, is that where, from my perspective, right? I mean, but again, I work for artificial, so you feel free to say differently, but I mean, I see that that's where like platforms like artificial, right, from a digital lab perspective can be beneficial. Maybe folk like, who might have experiences like your wife at the beginning, right, won't see the benefit as easy, but it becomes easier over time to share information across those. Like it starts to remove the silos, right? So you're all operating in the same kind of playing field. I don't know, Olga, what do you think about that?
I think part of this process is the actual transition, right? And having the proper expectations that it's
Yeah.
not going to happen overnight. And it might be painful, but it's necessary. There's a lot of benefits and it has to be properly resourced. And I think that's where I see some of the companies not do as great as what they were hoping for is, they thought they had a digital mindset. They thought they're going to build out a lab that's going to be, fully integrated and, sort of this futuristic setup. But they cut some investment short. Either it's in the skill set, in the resources, in the hardware, in the digital space, right? So there's a little bit of that component as well, where maybe the people that are directly involved in the work that takes place, we understand what needs to be done, but unless there's support up on the executive level, it's going to be a tough conversation. But it's also, I see it as our responsibility, whether it's data engineers, lab automation folk, or what have you, to kind of communicate that vision and help the executive understand, here's what needs to happen. Here's how long it's going to take. If it's a, new startup, your timeline might be X. If you're an existing organization, it's probably going to be a much longer process. And there's different ways to tackle it to make sure that it's as smooth as possible. But the adoption of that transition, right? That's really the key. And it's a lot easier, I feel like, with, today's generation, right? They're all, technically savvy. So many of them come out from colleges, they're all programming in Python. You give them the phone, they know it. Babies are born, we give them the phone by the age of 2, they know exactly how to navigate it, right? It's natural to them. So I think the digital mindset is almost built into the new generation.
Mike, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. The RAT group, my group at Amgen, sits in an interesting position where, we have the opportunity to walk into any lab and see what the scientists are doing and work with them in there. And so we have a very close relationship, and they can come to us, basically by just knocking on our door and saying, hey, I have an idea. We can also be proactive and say, hey, we see what you're doing and we have an idea. And what's really cool about it is it gives us an opportunity to, without very much bureaucracy at all, to build something quickly, kind of as just a proof of concept, right? And see like, hey, does having a tool like this, and again, broad definition of what that is, hardware or software, does it help? And if it does, okay, let's go find, a commercial solution that will kind of endure the test of time, because we're not good at that, right? We're good at prototyping and coming up with things quickly, but they really shouldn't become enterprise solutions. And so we try to just fill the gap. I think the good news though, is there are and again, not to be an artificial salesperson, but artificial tetrascience. I mean, there's a whole bunch of companies that I think are seeing, that there's a huge need now to build this ecosystem where everything's connected and the data is all getting to somewhere where it can be consumed by anybody who needs it. And actually that anybody is even transcending just our company. And there's now consortiums and, so I think that we're in an era now where these tools are being made and developed by companies that are going to, at a minimum, be helpful, but realistically, they're going to enable, a new way of doing science.
So, you've both been in the industry for a long time, right? And you started as, I'm assuming, pure lab automation people, right? And over the course of the years, and we've talked about this, right? It's shifted. I mean, I used to sell custom automation systems. Now I'm selling digital lab software, right? And your organizations are shifting into a digital. I think, Mike, you had said that like you can't walk out your door without hitting a data scientist, right? Or running into a data scientist, right? And that didn't used to be the case, right? So I'm wondering, like, did you realize that your roles were changing or that the ecosystem was changing? Like, or I mean, I'm sure you did, but like, was there an aha moment where you're like, oh, wow, this is actually becoming a thing and it's not, it's not just a passing fancy?
I think it kind of came, sorry, Mike, to interrupt. It kind of came from necessity, right? Just the roles have evolved based on the complexity of the automation that we're building out and the volume of data that we're cranking out and making that end user experience much more improved than what it is, because uploading files and moving things left and right and copying and pasting the Excel spreadsheets that are being output by the different data readers. It's very clunky, right? So we've kind of became a jack of all trades, where now he's starting to manipulate the data so it's in the right format to be taken in by the next engine. And I don't think I realized when that transition, really took place but just over time, looking back, and I was like, oh my God, I'm a lot more involved now in the LIMS, right? In the world of laboratory information management system, and then digitizing SOPs and so on and so forth. So I think it happened organically. I don't think we pause often enough to think of what the role is, but it has definitely evolved and expanded over time.
Yeah, I don't think I can put my finger on the, a seminal moment where it was like, well, different ball game now. But we do, constantly chase pain points, I would say, in saying, well, where do you need help now? Where do you need help now? And we got to the point where the industry had evolved, and lab automation, and I'm not trying to be flippant about this, but it was a little bit of a solved problem, right? And so you just sort of hit a limit of, given the resources you have, the staff that you have, this is as much as they can do. And I really think the emergence of AI and machine learning over the past, I mean, maybe at least 5 years, and probably more than that, I think that's driven the demand for, hey, we need more data. We need more data. And you just can't scale anymore until your informatics get fully automated. So I sort of agree with Olga there. I don't know if there was any, one moment, but I would say in the recent past, there's been a sort of tremendous push for scientists to be able to be more productive in the lab. And to do that, they need tools that allow them to, tools that I would call them like force multipliers, right? So that any one given scientist can be more and more productive, still given the same amount of time in a day that, that they're available to work.
I think what's fascinating, Ginger, is the data is there, right?
Yeah.
We're generating that data. It's just an ability to mine it and look at it from all the different angles. And I think that's part of digitizing the lab, right? And extracting a lot more from the same well, same sample, right? To try to get a lot more bang for your buck.
Yeah.
If you will.
No, it's interesting, right? Because we go from thinking, or at least in my world, I've done this, right? You go from thinking just the hardware, or maybe just the software to run the hardware, to, when you talk about like a lab of the future, which is a whole other, that could be a 2-hour conversation on what that means, across a variety of different people and experiences. But, you go from software that runs hardware to digitizing your entire ecosystem. And what does that mean? And how does it, and how do you begin to shift your thinking around it? And it sounds like for you both, it was more organic than a conscious thought process, right? It became, like you said, like necessity, or, chasing pain points, and into really, and with all the data that you need, you had to find some way to be able to cohesively pull it all together.
Yeah, I
guess,
think
yeah.
I think part of what we, maybe, and it's an engineering mindset, but there's obviously a ton of scientists that have migrated into the space of lab automation. And then, to be honest with you, I think those folks are much stronger in the lab automation space, but we're process driven, right? So I think it's in this innate ability to look at the process beginning to end and figure out, just like Mike said, pain points, or there's got to be a better way to do this, right? If I could only do X, Y, and Z, maybe it's the file exchange, in the background that doesn't involve a human being actually copying and pasting things. But it's this working smart approach, right? And just realizing that there's got to be a better way to do your everyday job. And there's nothing wrong with it, right? You get much more gratifying experience in what you do every day. It kind of elevates the complexity in what you're involved every day.
Yeah, and I do think, we want to keep our scientists focused on and thinking about biology and chemistry and science, right? And not the mechanics of, did I put the plate in the wrong way, or where do I put it? Just the minutiae of running a lab, right? So things like digital twins, these are all, again, force multipliers that are helping a scientist be more productive and focused on the right thing.
Yeah. It makes a lot of sense, right? Because when you have those, you're just enabling them to be able to do their science, right? And you're removing the rote tasks, right, that they would otherwise like take up valuable mind space, right, to focus on. And instead you have it there within the digital twins or digitized SOPs or what have you, right? So it sounds like, from what I've heard from you both, right, like ensuring like the transition is properly resourced, or even that there is a transition, if you're starting to shift from this lab automation into this new digital ecosystem or this digital lab environment. And, and really just understanding like where those pain points are, right? And finding ways and understanding ways to optimize the scientist experience, I would say. Does that, and ensure that the data that everyone needs to touch is provided in a format that everyone can access. Yeah.
Yep. I think it's also worth pointing out that we're asking people to change the way they do things, right? And that's disruptive to their work, because scientists are very motivated people, right? So they want to be productive, and there might be a period where your productivity, you have to slow down a little bit to implement all this change, and there can be resistance to that. So, it does require some executive leadership.
Do you find like the executives, and are companies starting to become more receptive to new ways of doing things these days? More so,
for sure.
Kind of like now's the time, or soon is the time.
Yeah, I'm definitely seeing this transition in this space. And I wonder if it's, similar to what was happening with AI, right? That was the buzzword for a few years, right? So now I feel like the new buzzword is the digital lab. And everybody wants to be at the forefront of it, but they might not understand, what does that even mean, right? So I think there is support. I think that's part of the draw, the next big thing, right? The investments come in to support whatever the next big thing is. And maybe it's the digital lab in whatever form or shape we make it to be, right? And it's up to us to define it, I feel, because sky is the limit. There's no defined boundaries of what the digital lab might actually mean, right? So it's such an exciting opportunity to be doing this right now when the tools are kind of coming to fruition and we can pull on all these different resources to create, a completely different experience in the lab.
Yeah, I think now more than ever, there maybe is less resistance to change or more enthusiasm for it, because I mean, AI is just all over the news, all this, it's very exciting, not within our industry, but just everywhere, right? So I think everybody's willing to take a leap of faith and say, like, yeah, this is going to be big. And it is an exciting time because we're going to start to see therapeutics that were designed not by a person.
Yeah.
And that's going to be exciting, and the time is now, right? We've been working on it for several years, so I think we're going to start seeing some big wins from companies that have done this, that have implemented this, right? So
it's very cool. So
gets
it sounds like it's like moved out of disruptive and into innovative, right? Because how like you have like that shift along the spectrum, right?
Yeah, but it's money time. It's time to no, don't take that wrong. It's like we need to like have these big wins realized, now, right? Because
so we only have a couple minutes left, and I really appreciate you both joining me for this chat. It's always fun to talk with you both about digital lab and lab automation and where we've shifted and how we're shifting. And so I definitely appreciate the conversation. Folks, as I mentioned, we're going to make this a monthly discussion, and next month's topic will be the evolution of the lab automation strategy. And Ruth Peterson, who's the Vice President of Marketing over at Tisham, will join me for that conversation. So stay tuned for that invite. But Mike and Olga, in the last minute or two, do you have anything left that you might want to add?
Go ahead, Olga. I'll follow you.
I think and some of the universities have already started doing that, but we want to see a lot more people in the space, whether it's the new talent that's joining the field, or maybe it's the tech guys, right, that are all seem to be kind of heavily populated on the West Coast. It would be amazing to have, people that are true, software developers, the visionaries with the digital backbone in mind, to enter the space. And I think that's a big of a gap for us. So it would be nice to see that transition take place.
Yeah, like I just said, I think it's an incredibly exciting time to be in this industry and working on lab automation and digitizing your lab and lab of the future, whatever you want to call it. Having been in the industry long enough, you sort of see these waves of transformational improvements versus incremental improvements. And I think now we're sort of riding, a big transformational change in the way we, run our labs and the way we do things. And it's an exciting time, right? And I think it's also interesting that, the next generation of scientists and engineers coming out of school, this is the norm for them. This is like they're every day. This is what I expect. And so it's awesome to have, like you mentioned, disruptors, people that don't understand, why are we not doing this already? It's an exciting time.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for joining me today and just sharing your experiences and your expertise in the area and providing the audience with some tips and tricks, if you will, from shifting from lab automation to digital lab. And we've recorded the session, and I'll send out a link to those who registered. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.